Let's talk about the deficiencies with the current method. There's no ability right now for us to take back bank REOs. Larry Litton wants to unload hundreds of properties under the current system, the current land bank process. The city doesn't want them. None of your cities would want them. First of all, you don't have the money to properly maintain and hold a vacant property. It's more complicated than putting up plywood over doors and windows. You really want an alarm system, you want heat, you want electricity. You really want to make sure that what you mothball is still there when you come back to unmothball it later. We have problems with REO and HUD. You know the whole story. I'm not going to get into the HUD dollar houses. That's for another entire session. But Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the GSEs. The problem is with intake and disposition, the options are constrained, and then we begin the repeat cycles of speculation, depletes our equity, and we're not able to work with willing owners who would like to relocate. Deficiency 2, no system-wide protocols with cities with REOs. This is going to get complicated. I'm going to move this quickly. Let's go to this one. Lacks entrepreneurial capability. We like to think that if we had a land bank, we'd be in a position to take property in and be as aggressive as we possibly could in disposing of property. We like to be in a position to make decisions that are more business-like decisions. If you have to go through a city council, you have to go through a board, and every decision has to be scrutinized and going before a board or a commission, it can really slow this up. So we like to be in a position to move very quickly. We don't want to be caught up in too many rules and bidding because it really could create problems for us. Deficiency 3, it continues to deplete our tax base. Folks, I'll repeat what I said. When the auditor does his partial reappraisal in 2009 and does that master reappraisal in 2012, I think for the first time in my memory, in my lifetime, you're going to see the overall duplicate in the county fall. Now, I saw the figures yesterday released by CNN. I don't know if they're realty track figures, but according to those, Northeast Ohio has lost 10% of its value on sales that were just reported. Not as bad as Las Vegas, which was at 22%, and Florida cities and California cities, San Francisco was at 18%, to about 10%. The median was about 12%. So we're talking about it's a regional problem. It's no longer just Cleveland. We're all experiencing the problem. So the regional problem requires a regional solution. And here's what I want to talk to quickly, and that is what we've envisioned in a land bank. You know, these slides are somewhat confining. So what I'm going to do is I'm just now going to talk maybe without slides. I'll leave it up there, and then we'll talk without slides. We've prepared a law that basically changes the law in 3 major ways. The first thing it does, it takes Section 1724 of the Ohio Revised Code. It is a section that already exists, and it gives the county the authority to create something called a Community Improvement Corporation. That's authority we already have. We already have a CIC. It meets about every other week on a Wednesday morning. I'm a member. There are commission members from the Board of Commission. We do loans. We do brownfield monies. We're already there. We're going to take that existing section, and we're going to give a county the authority to start a new CIC and infuse it with all kinds of power as it relates to land. The ability to hold land, sell it for more than market value, sell it for less than market value, the ability to swap, the ability to trade. It'll give it all kinds of authority. It's a long section because we wanted to make sure that the powers for this board were broad. It will be a board that will either be 5 or 7 members, and that to be decided. If it's a 5-member board, it's going to be the 2 commissioners. By law, there have to be 2 commissioners, the treasurer, and probably 2 members of city government in Cleveland. If it's a 7-member board, you're going to see that same configuration, probably of representatives of mayors and city managers, perhaps a city council association. It's not yet set in stone. Perhaps an additional representative from the city. So it's either a 5 or 7-member board will be making these decisions. So we're going to have a new corporation. Here's where it's going to get kind of tricky, and I'll do as best I can in explaining it. I collect $1.5 billion a year. I collect $750 million in January. On January 15th, we close it, and an equal number in July. We know historically that about 90% of that debt is that tax bill is paid on time. About 10% in each half is not. Now, as you know, if you don't pay property taxes on time, in the first few days of the delinquency, it's a 5% penalty, and then when it goes beyond the first few days, it goes to a 10% penalty, and then interest eventually starts to tabulate as well. What they've done in Flint, Michigan, and what we propose to do here, is to basically, on the day that the property tax collections close, is to pay everybody in Cuyahoga County off in full. Now, we're going to have 90% of it. We're going to either internally fund or borrow the balance. And we're going to give Parma, we're going to give the Parma schools, the Cleveland schools, you'll have all your money, and we're settled. Nice to see you. We'll see you in the next collection. Now, what does that mean? That means that there is money we have to collect to pay back our debt because we've just borrowed a little bit of money. But it also means we know there will be penalty and there will be interest. And it's that penalty and interest that they've been using up in Flint, Michigan, up in Genesee County, that they've diverted to help fund the land bank. We know by historic analysis of tax collections that that will be about $7 million a year. That after we paid ourselves back, that we will be able to generate about $7 million a year. And that money is absolutely critical, because if we don't have money to fund a land bank, then we really should not even talk about having a land bank, because it'd be a waste of time. The land bank would become the largest slum landlord in the state of Ohio overnight. A land bank, there's going to be a small staff, and there's some amazing organizations in town. We've got great CDCs that do a nice job. Cleveland Housing Network does a great job. There's a company in Brooklyn Heights you may not be aware of called Safeguard Properties. They're over off of Granger Road. They employ about 450 people. Safeguard Properties is the third largest property management and maintenance firm in the country. Last month, they inspected over 600,000 properties nationally, and they maintained them. So I tell you about Safeguard, just an example. A man named, was it Robert Kaplan, is that his name? Robert Klein, sorry. I knew it was K and I knew it was Robert.
Michael Howard.
Yeah, but they're right there in Brooklyn Heights, and I mentioned them as an example of a resource we have locally that can do for us what we need to have done without going out and creating a bureaucracy. The notion of going out and hiring 50 or 60 people and ending up on the front page of the Plain Dealer doesn't appeal to me. I'd much rather have a smaller operation, go to people who do it, so they can do the maintenance. I'm not saying them, but somebody like them, Cleveland Housing Network. So we'd be using the resources out there to help us to maintain these properties. That's going to cost money. It's not free. So that's where some of the money would go. We propose early on in the process that we will be going to the bond market with the city of Cleveland and with the county, and with the full faith and credit of the county. We have got to do massive demolition in this county. Now, it's primarily initially a Cleveland problem, but I'm telling you, if we don't get these houses down, the policeman killed in Glenville 10 weeks ago, you know where he was killed? He was killed getting somebody out of a vacant property. Tony can tell the story, tells it better than I, about a gentleman in Slavic Village a year ago and last month, 1 month ago, who came out and was beaten to death at his home in Slavic Village because they were stripping the siding off of his house because the next house next door had siding stripped. I've said this before, vacant properties give people who have a reason to hide a place to hide. And it's not going to make things better overnight, but I think at least it will arrest the decline and the decay. And I got to believe I'm better off if I'm one of 3 houses still habitable on the street than if I'm one of 13, but I'm only one of 3 houses with people living in them. I wouldn't want to live on that street. So demolition, it won't be just Cleveland. I've talked to Mayor Cervenik. It'll be demolition where it's needed. You might have a need for it in Warrensville Heights. I think you do, in fact. Some, not a lot. It would be selective, but in areas like Cleveland, you see obviously a wide-scale use. So it would be, the first would be the land reutilization, 1724 Corporation, the right to divert excess tax collections, and the third change we're asking for is going to be a very interesting one, and that is that when property is foreclosed, like I showed you on the map here, you get people up and saying, I'll bid on that if it's good, and they'll ignore the bad stuff. Under the new foreclosure method we're proposing, once a property is adjudicated foreclosed by the judge, you're going to have 45 days to get in and make good on a payment or on a payment plan. If you don't make the payment at the end of the 45th day, now remember, you'd be going to the sheriff and there would be an auction. Under the new system, the property comes directly to the land bank, and that's it. The land bank then becomes the owner of the property. Land sales will potentially become a source of revenue for this land bank. So it is a kind of a radical solution, but you know what? This is a time that really demands radical solutions.